Rafer was currently busy at work, documenting and observing the behavior of a small mammalian creature discovered on a newly charted planet. The creature in question resembled his own kind, but quadrupedal, small enough that it fit in his hand, and lacking any horns. With the assistance of Glass on the Sand, a fellow researcher, he was watching this new species through a pane of one-way glass, revealing an enclosure mimicking the environment these creatures were native to. So far, it wasn't anything out of the ordinary, but it was always interesting to document unknown animals. Suddenly, behind Rafer, he could hear the sound of the door to the room opening. It was probably the veteran researcher who left for the dining hall a moment ago. Without turning around, Rafer grunted, "That you, Harvey?" No response. No footsteps either. Rafer decided to turn around to see who it was and was met with the figure of a serpent towering over him. Well, the Union called it a serpent, the real name of this race was unknown, for obvious reasons. It had stopped only a few paces from him, all 6 of its pure yellow eyes vacantly staring at Rafer. It wore nothing, not even an identifier for rank or occupation. What exactly its intention was indiscernible. Serpents have always been a strange race, hard to read the expression of. This one's farthest left and farthest right face tendrils were curled up, with the rest of them hanging from its face, resembling a finely maintained beard of Rafer's kind, in shape alone. If Rafer remembered correctly, this was a questioning expression. Wanting to know what this thing was doing here, Rafer grunted. You want something?" The serpent turned its body to the side and began to slither to the right, showing off its long tail to Rafer and the patterns that ran across its length. The bioluminescent patterns began to glow in various colors, sometimes slowly pulsing with color and sometimes rapidly flashing. Though Rafer knew the Rao and Vekaran standard languages, he hadn't yet grasped the strange bioluminescent language of the serpents. He turned to Glass on the Sand, who had already turned away from his work to see what this serpent wanted and was now paying attention to the bioluminescent lights. Glass on the Sand clicked and chattered in Rao standard. "It's asking what happened to Earth." Rafer was partially shocked by that question. It had been a very long time since he had learned of humans and Earth, and at no point in his life had anyone asked about that subject. Not since his days in Gless Academy at least. He knew what happened, but why was this serpent asking? In another grunt, he responded. "Well, why do you want to know? Why are you asking a biologist of all people?" More incomprehensible blinking. Glass on the Sand translated again. "It says it was researching Earth and became curious when the record stopped after the Union year 4935. It's asking us because it's been going from room to room questioning people. We're the 4th group it's asked." Rafer let out an exasperated snort. Serpents were a recent addition to the Union of 3, now 4, races. Humans and Earth had long been cut from academic courses now, so of course, this serpent would only know about Earth from scant physical and digital record, which hadn't been updated in centuries, and wouldn't be likely to find anyone else who knew. Rafer, however, was over 400 Union years old, so he knew. But this meant that he would have to explain to this serpent why the record ends so suddenly. He called off the observation and turned the glass, revealing the enclosure from transparent to opaque. He found a nearby chair to rest his figure on and took in a deep breath. "Okay. Well, if you really want to know, I'll tell you." "Glass, can you translate for me here? Say exactly what it signs, by the way. That makes it easier." Glass cuddled closer to Rafer, rolling up near him in a position that made it look as if it was using its exoskeletal back as a curved chair. The serpent had now curled up a bit, using its tail to form a sort of spiral to rest its arms and torso on, while still showing off some of its bioluminescent patterns. Playing with some of the long fur on his face, Rafer began to recollect some of the knowledge he had of Earth. But before he could, he had one last question for the serpent. "So, where do you want me to start?" Bioluminescent patterns followed by a translation from Glass. At this point, Rafer began to imagine the serpent speaking, and not Glass just translating. Though he knew there was nothing underneath those face tendrils. Them swaying a bit gave the illusion of speech. I know all of human history that was documented by the Union. I want to know how the Union found Earth and why the record stops. Putting one of his hands to his chin and resting the other on one of his legs, Rafer began to scratch his fur as he told what he remembered. So, around the Union year of only 100, a scan and subsequent scouting mission revealed Earth and the human race that was a part of it. You have to understand, at this time, only the Vekaran and my kind, the Cooler, were members of the Union. Your kind and the Rao hadn't yet been discovered. So, this was a major discovery for the Union. You need me to tell you what humans were like at this point? That won't be needed. I am aware that humans were at a primitive level of technology and civilization. Rafer let go of his chin and began to gesture with his now free hand. Alright, well, anyways, like I said, this was a major discovery. The Union began to closely watch humanity over around the next 4,800 Union years. Even as the Rao were discovered, already with advanced technology and ready to join the Union, they still watched humanity. They watched them develop, watched the great and terrible things they did. When they finally started to compete over going to space, even when that competition was over, the Union was convinced they were going to join any year now. They were sending signals like mad. They created a satellite that gave us a clearer picture of their world. We sent more scouts to observe, to document. Even when it looked as if they might drive themselves to extinction, they got their act together. Rafer paused for a moment. Now to give this serpent its answer. Then, silence. Complete, deafening silence. It was quiet for a moment. The serpent was processing what Rafer had just said. I don't understand. Rafer hunched over and looked the serpent in the eyes. I mean, we suddenly got no more signals, no more activity. When the Union realized this, they sent scouts. Those scouts never came back. Though they didn't know the reason, the Union made the declaration that the Sol system, and Earth by extension, was a dead zone. 300 years of silence only confirmed this. The promising race of humanity was so close to achieving what they would call faster-than-light technology, and they just disappeared without a trace. Rafer was getting a bit emotional now. Though he never oversaw the Earth observation, he always felt melancholy about how close humanity came to knowing they weren't alone in the universe. But looking at the serpent, it was quiet again. It looked as if this serpent didn't know how to process this information. But why the silence? Exasperated, Rafer raised both of his arms. I already said, we don't know. Could have been nuclear war, ecological collapse, an unknown threat, whatever. We don't know, and never will. More silence. Why did it take this thing so long to understand? Then I'll find out. The serpent stopped for a moment and turned around enough that 3 of its eyes were focused on Rafer. Didn't you hear what I said? No scouts have returned, and I don't think you'll be the exception. Don't go to Earth. I heard what you said. I simply must know. Rafer let out another snort. There was clearly no convincing it otherwise. Okay, look, I won't stop you. But what exactly are you planning? I will compile a report on the status of Sol and Earth, as well as humanity, if it still remains. I will return here when it's done. Why are you so driven to do this? It is my kind's nature. We simply must know, must explore, must question. It is an urge that simply must be fulfilled. Well, fine. You don't return, we know you're dead. If you do return, you will have solved the greatest mystery of the Union. Just try not to die. Got that? No bioluminescence, only a nod, a universal sign of agreement, adopted from humanity. The serpent used one of its arms to point to a marking on its back. A patch of green on its teal skin, resembling a sort of irregular spiral. This is unique to me. You will know it's me when you see this. With no more words, the serpent slithered away. Glass turned to Rafer and chittered. What a weird thing. So, want to bet if it comes back? Rafer looked down at his insectoid coworker with a concerned expression. He knew the Rao were a naturally greedy race, but he didn't expect this. Are you seriously betting on if it dies or not? 15 credits. No. Glass scuttled away from the doorway, leaving Rafer alone. Contemplating for a moment before he turned away from the door and closed it. Going back to the opaque glass, he set it back to transparent and began the observation again. To put that conversation behind him, he picked up a nearby data slate and began to send a message to the head of security on the station. Inform me when a serpent with a green spiral marking under its right shoulder returns to this station. The message was marked as received a moment later. With that, he set the data slate down and got back to work. Author's name and the link to original text is in the description. Consider tapping the thumbs up and pressing the subscribe button if you want to listen to the subsequent parts of this story.